Imagine being the last player in a dying server. The map's empty, your eyes are tearing up, and the whole world's straight up ghosting you. That's the story of our old grumpy T-Rex, basically running on vibes and ancient instincts, with extinction knocking at his door while the other species already rage quit. But just when it feels like it's truly game over, something happens that changes everything. And what's that? Let's find out. For that, we must go way back around 66 million years ago to what is now North America. It is a time when monstrous predators roam the earth, running wild across the land. Among them, the most fearsome of all is the mighty Tyrannosaurus, also known as T-Rex. Not only is it a top predator, but is also the largest terrestrial carnivore in Earth's history, often referred to as the king of the dinosaurs. The T-Rex possesses several terrifying predatory features, a powerful jaw lined with massive bone-crushing teeth, and a colossal lower body weighing nearly 10 tons. Its long legs and muscular tail add to its formidable presence. With these features, this apex predator tears through smaller dinosaur species, ruling the land as if it were built for domination. But, and there's always a but, as mighty as these beasts are, some still fall to illness, accidents, or other natural causes. And a few, rather than going out in a blaze of prehistoric glory, meet a fate far less dramatic. That's exactly what one unfortunate T-Rex looked like, just laid out on the ground, jaw open wide like a college student who accidentally took 2 melatonin gummies instead of 1. As the lifeless creature rests under the open sky, a curious pterosaur spots it from above. The sight is odd, a monstrous predator, seemingly dead and alone in such an isolated place. Intrigued and perhaps a little hungry, the pterosaur swoops down. Because let's be honest, in the Mesozoic world, if it's not moving, it's probably on the menu. This pterosaur is no exception. It lands on the ground and begins casually walking toward the seemingly lifeless T-Rex, whose mouth remains open as it lies still. However, as the bird-like creature approaches, it becomes slightly uneasy despite the dinosaur's corpse-like appearance. There's no rotten smell. That's odd. Still, the Tyrannosaur dismisses the thought, assuming the beast must have died recently. As it moves a bit closer, it notices how thin and gaunt the dinosaur's body is, and wonders if it had starved to death on this desolate island. The creature becomes excited, speculating whether a violent storm had swept this giant predator onto the shore. But before the thought fully forms, a sudden movement breaks the stillness. The pterosaur looks down, realizing, too late, that its leg is now caught between the dinosaur's massive jaws. In a flash, the T-Rex snaps them shut, clamping down with bone-crushing force. The entire act was a trap. The dinosaur is very much alive. It rises to its feet with the bird trapped in its mouth and begins thrashing its head violently from side to side. The pterosaur screams, but within moments, its cries fade as it takes its final breath. After a short while, the T-Rex, sensing that the prey is no longer struggling, drops the body and exhales in relief. It has been days since it had a proper meal, and it wonders if it was 3 or 4 days. But then, another voice corrects him that it's been exactly 3.5 days. The T-Rex looks over, seemingly surprised. He had thought it had been much longer since he caught something this fresh. Still, he doesn't want to eat it alone. He offers some to the other voice, referring to it as Wilson. But Wilson is just a skull. With no reply, the T-Rex prepares to eat the entire bird himself. This is the life of the T-Rex, not one of a vast continent filled with life and endless prey, but a lonely existence on a small, distant island, far removed from most signs of life. It is an unfortunate fate, as he grows older and hungrier with each passing day. After finishing the entire bird, the T-Rex decides to take a nap under a palm tree with his full stomach. As usual, his eyes open to the sound of birds chirping above him. This is how the T-Rex begins his new day, waking up to the songs of birds. Already exhausted by another day on the small, boring island, he falls into his same old routine, beginning with a walk along the beach around the island. He not just patrolled his territory, but also kept an eye out for any potential food, if he was lucky. The grandpa energy is real. Luck, however, is pretty rare on this island. It's not often he gets a surprise, like a dead animal washing up on the shore. Meanwhile, the pterosaurs are over there, munching on fish and getting well fed. The T-Rex can't help but feel a little jealous and envious. He wonders if he's the only one starving on the island. But it wasn't always like this. When he first arrived on the island, he was shocked to see turtles everywhere. They were all over the beach, squealing around. The T-Rex was amazed at their numbers and the variety of sizes. There were so many. It seemed like they were taking over the shore. And then, well, the T-Rex did what T-Rexes do best, not chasing jeeps at parks, but with their fierce, predatory nature. Without thinking much, he started chowing down on the poor turtles, left and right. They tasted great, were super filling, and gave him hope for survival. He'd accidentally drifted to this island, but with the abundance of turtles, he knew he wouldn't starve. Plus, with no one else around, the turtles were more than enough to keep him fed, and he even made a little den by the shore. But then, deciding to go back to the mainland of the island, well, he would soon regret that choice. Just as night turns into day, fate pulls a total Uno reverse on him. One night, the T-Rex woke up, and his hopes and dreams were shattered when he saw the ocean current flowing toward the island, making it impossible to go back to the mainland. Not long after, the turtle he had been munching on also dried up. And that's when the T-Rex realized he was doomed. He knew that, like this, he would either starve to death or die of old age. Over time, he lost hope and continued on with his usual struggles. Back to the present, the T-Rex finishes his round along the shore, but there's nothing to eat. However, our boy has a backup plan, hunting for his own food. So he lies down on the ground, pretending to be a corpse. This method works pretty well and helps him avoid starving to death, at least for a little while. After taking down his prey, he drinks just enough water to quench his thirst. There's a lake for that, and he's careful with how much he drinks, rationing it so it won't dry up and leave him dying of thirst. And just like that, his day's work is done, his stomach is filled, his thirst is quenched, and there's not much else to do. So, as usual, he sits under the shade of a tree, staring at the horizon to pass the time. He also has Wilson, his imaginary skull friend, that he talks to in order to stay sane. Deep down, the T-Rex knows he's muttering nonsense to a skull, but he still hopes it might speak back to him. Every day, he gazes out at the ocean, hoping to see the corpses of other dinosaurs wash up or, even better, to see one of his kind come alive again. That would be the one thing he longs for in his life. Our poor fellow has lived on that small, secluded island for over 20 years. Just like every other day, he looks out at the ocean, sees nothing but hopelessness and despair. He closes his eyes to take a nap. As he drifts off into sleep, he dreams about his mom asking him what he wants to be when he grows up. The young T-Rex cub, full of excitement, answers that he wants to be just like her, big, strong, and cool. But as he says this, a flashback hits him. He sees his mother lying lifeless on the ground with her body covered in wounds. And when he looks ahead, there's a carcass of his mom towering in front of him, revealing that he never did become like her. The nightmarish dream wakes the T-Rex with a scream, his heart racing in anxiety. It takes him a while to realize it was just a nightmare. Still sweating, he looks at Wilson and tells him about the dream. It's a memory from long ago, one the T-Rex doesn't want to remember because it brings back feelings of helplessness and horror. He asks Wilson if he's ever had a dream like that, but, of course, there's no reply from the skull. This, combined with the loneliness and anger he's built up over the years, makes the T-Rex lash out. He roars at the skull, demanding it speak up. His roar is so loud it shakes the entire forest. Gaining some composure, the T-Rex realizes it's pointless to hope for an answer from something already dead. In despair, he leaves and heads back into the woods. There, he notices the weather growing more aggressive, signaling that a storm is coming. In the past, the T-Rex didn't care about rain or storms, but now, he feels like the rain is mocking him for being an old grandpa. Falling deeper into hopelessness, the T-Rex looks up at the sky, wishing he could go back. But as he does, the carcass figure of his mom appears beside him, asking if he really thinks going back is possible. The figure discourages him, saying he can't go back to the mainland, not in his current state. It points out the T-Rex's physical condition, claiming that even if he somehow makes it back, he won't be able to do anything. According to her, the T-Rex would just die, and he'd never be able to live a normal life back on the mainland. The T-Rex tries to block out these thoughts, but the carcass figure keeps pushing, reminding him that he can't do it. As he murmurs for her to shut up, she refuses, revealing that she's inside his head. The figure keeps feeding his hopelessness, belittling him and calming his belief that his life is already ruined. According to the voice, a cool adult the T-Rex wanted to become is long gone. He's getting old. The figure repeats his taunts about growing old and dying on this island. The voice continues to belittle him, then fades away, leaving the T-Rex feeling more discouraged than ever. With all the trash talk, the T-Rex starts walking toward the ocean, hoping to drown himself. He thinks that maybe ending it all would be better than living a miserable, pathetic life. He knows it'll be painful for just a few moments, with sharks tearing him apart as he drowns, but then it'll all be over. His bones will be the only thing left, and no one will even remember that he existed. For a brief moment, he wonders if, after all that, he might get to start over. But just as the T-Rex walks into the ocean, a plesiosaur leaps out of the water. It tries to attack him but misses. The T-Rex is startled, watching as the predator swims away. He sighs in relief, still shaken from the surprise. But then, something hits him. As he stands there, frozen, he realizes something that shakes him to the core. He's afraid to even take his own life. Losing hope, the T-Rex drags himself back to the island and lies under the cover of the trees as the rain pours down. He's in despair, thinking that not only does he lack the courage to die, but he'll just keep growing older and eventually die of old age. He berates himself for being afraid to die like that. This wasn't the life he wanted, and the path he dreamed of sure as hell wasn't this. All this poor T-Rex wants is to go back home. Press F in the chat if you feel for our boy. As he sleeps through the night in despair, the bird songs wake him the next morning. However, This morning feels different as he finds a small dinosaur cub lying by the tree trunk. The T-Rex watches it in disbelief. It's been years since he's seen something like this with his own eyes. The cub stirs and wakes up, noticing the towering beast in front of it. But instead of running away, the cub is surprised to see him. Our boy, ever since he was swept ashore, has lived all alone on this island. But now, everything seems to have changed. He stands in shock as he sees a little figure, another dinosaur, looking around in excitement, clearly curious about the place. The young one seems full of questions, glancing up at the T-Rex and referring to him as an old man. As the cub eagerly asks questions about the place and T-Rex's identity, he remains silent, still grappling with the shock of discovering that someone has left a child on this remote island. For the first time in years, another of his kind has arrived. A moment he had dreamed of his entire life, but isn't the adult companion he once hoped for. Instead, it's a young and innocent-looking cub. Inside his mind, a storm of thoughts rages like, who is that cub? Where did he come from? And most importantly, how did he end up there? His thoughts are abruptly interrupted when the cub repeats his question. Snapped back to reality, T-Rex nervously asks him to repeat what he said. The cub, with wide eyes and endless curiosity, asks for his name and the name of the place they're in. Despite having lived on the island for 20 years, T-Rex suddenly finds himself at a loss for words, an identity crisis bubbling beneath the surface. After a moment of hesitation, he lets out a sigh and introduces himself as Zeke, an old man. He then gently asks the cub for his name before promising to explain everything. The cub excitedly introduces himself as Nova. Hearing this, Zeke nods and tells him to follow, saying he'll share his story and, in turn, reveal the truth about the island. Though hesitant at first, Nova agrees, quickly becoming fascinated by the flocks of birds soaring across the sky. Meanwhile, Zeke, who has long accepted that he would die of old age and loneliness, finds himself unexpectedly blessed with companionship. Nova, young, full of energy, and one of his own kind, seems like a miracle. But as much as Zeke feels comforted, a gnawing sense of suspicion lingers. Something about Nova doesn't quite add up. Despite being the same species, under normal circumstances, a youngling would be terrified to see an adult T-Rex like Zeke, but Nova is quite the opposite. This unusual reaction makes Zeke wonder if it's simply because Nova is too young and inexperienced to understand the dangers of the world. Curious, Zeke questions Nova about his lack of fear, wondering aloud what he would have done if Zeke had been dangerous. After all, to Nova, Zeke is still a complete stranger. The question catches Nova off guard, but the young cub responds with unexpected wisdom that if Zeke were truly dangerous, he would have already acted by now. Zeke is surprised by the answer, but finds himself silently agreeing. He moves on to the next question, asking Nova how he ended up on the island in the first place. The question seems to startle the young cub, and for a moment, Nova hesitates. Noticing this, Zeke gently assures him that he doesn't have to answer if he's uncomfortable. But Nova, speaking in broken and scattered sentences, slowly reveals the truth that he remembers being with his family, then drowning in water, and finally waking up on the shore. As Nova's fragmented story reveals, Zeke begins to connect the dots. A storm had swept through the island just the day before. It now becomes clear to him that the same storm must have carried this little one here, depositing him like a piece of driftwood on the island's shore. Lost in thought, Zeke is brought back to the present by Nova's voice, but instead of repeating his earlier question about where they were, Nova surprises him by pointing out that they have somehow returned to the same spot they started from. The cub appears visibly shocked and looks to Zeke for an explanation. Realizing just how innocent and unaware Nova truly is, Zeke decides it's time to tell him the truth. He begins carefully, asking Nova if he knows what an island is. The word clearly confuses the young cub, prompting Zeke to explain. He tells Nova that an island is a piece of land surrounded by water, and that the one they are currently standing on is one of the smallest among them all. Definitely not made for long-term survival or dramatic anime battles. According to Zeke, the island isn't just small, it's practically non-existent. And at this very moment, Nova is stuck there with him. Zeke explains that no matter how hard they search, they won't find a single living herbivore on the island unless it's a corpse washed ashore. The only residents are seabirds and a few tiny shark-like dinosaurs. He goes on to reveal that even their drinking water is limited. There's only a small lake, and they have to ration it carefully to prevent it from drying up. Zeke also warns of the violent storms that occasionally strike the island, then turns to Nova, questioning whether he now understands just how hostile this place really is. Despite living there for 20 years, Zeke has never once been able to leave. He tells Nova how unfortunate he is to have ended up there, fated to spend the rest of his life trapped and starving. Just yesterday, Zeke had been praying for someone, anyone, for company. Now that someone is here, he feels more taken aback than relieved. It's a miracle, yes, but for the little cub, it might be the worst kind of luck imaginable. As Zeke finishes laying out the grim truth, he notices Nova standing in silence. He assumes the young one is in shock, overwhelmed by everything he's just heard. A wave of despair washes over Zeke. He hates revealing such harsh realities to a child, but he refuses to offer false hope. This, he believes, is the truth Nova needs to hear. But then, to Zeke's astonishment, Nova, having heard it all, seems completely unfazed. Instead of being crushed by reality, he casually asks if that was all. Zeke stares at him, stunned, unsure if he's heard correctly. Nova, rather than breaking down or giving up, appears thrilled, almost amazed by the details. Zeke begins to lose his composure, shouting in frustration, wondering if Nova heard a single word he just said. But Nova, unfazed, confidently declares that having the whole island to themselves is more than enough. Zeke's frustration boils over as he yells louder, pointing out the obvious that they have no food, no resources, and no one else to rely on. To his surprise, Nova shouts back, claiming that's exactly the good part, because if no one else is on the island, then the bad ones who hurt his mother and others won't be here either. Hearing that, Zeke freezes, but then he shouts again, emphasizing that the point is Nova won't be able to leave the island, not now, not ever. Nova, however, remains confident, insisting that he will find a way out. Zeke challenges him, asking if he has a plan. Nova admits he doesn't, but recalls his father's words, that as long as one has hope, there's always a way. He counters Zeke's despair, stating that just because they can't see a way out doesn't mean they should give up. Zeke, hardened by 20 years of hopelessness, brushes off the boy's words. Yet Nova keeps trying, urging him not to let discouragement control him, reminding him that giving up won't change anything. Zeke now fully realizes that Nova is a strange kid, too hopeful, too stubborn. To shut him up, he half-heartedly agrees with him. He laughs it off, calling the cub overly optimistic, but warns him not to come crying later when reality hits. Zeke turns away, stating that he'll only teach Nova one thing: how to survive. Nova accepts that, calling him old man as he begins following with his small, determined steps. Just like that, Zeke, after 2 long decades, finds himself with a young companion. Zeke's first decision is to take little Nova to the lake. He knows the kid has ambition and carries an unshakable optimism, but the truth remains, they're still stuck on this strange, isolated island. They both begin exploring the place, but Zeke has no idea what's about to happen next, something that will shake him to his very core. 66 million years ago, it wasn't just the T-Rex that ruled as the apex predator of the continent. Another formidable contender soared through the skies, the Quetzalcoatlus, standing at 5 meters tall with a wingspan comparable to a modern jet. This flying monster truly earned its title as the king of the skies. It often targeted young T-Rex cubs, swallowing them whole whenever it spotted one. Back on the island, Zeke explains to Nova the pattern of ocean currents, how they move from east to west, making it nearly impossible to swim away. He shares a bit of the island's history, including about turtles and the true size of their home. When they finally reach the lake, Nova is shocked at how small it actually is. Zeke laughs, reminding him why he had mentioned the importance of rationing their water supply carefully. Next, Zeke leads Nova to the skull, which he has named Wilson, saying it was already there when he arrived. Nova finds it odd that the old dinosaur is talking to his skull, but Zeke plays it off as nothing unusual. Over time, Zeke shows Nova all the key features of the island, essential knowledge for survival. He even teaches him how to distinguish between seabirds and pterosaurs, pointing them out in the sky. He follows that with a lesson on tree types, but Nova quickly grows bored of the lecture. Eventually, Nova lashes out, insisting he already knows at least the basics about forests. Zeke gets the message. There really isn't much to teach anyway, considering how tiny the island is. He calls off the explanations and declares it's time to address their biggest concern: food. Nova is clueless about what Zeke means. To show him, Zeke begins with a hands-on lesson in hunting seabirds. Nova actually does pretty well and catches his first meal. Afterward, Zeke introduces him to other food options: crabs, lizards, and similar small creatures, which, due to Nova's size, should be enough for now. Nova then turns the question back on Zeke, asking what he usually eats. The question catches Zeke off guard. Nova points out that, with such a massive body, these tiny creatures surely aren't enough for him. Zeke eventually admits that he eats whatever he can find, but mostly relies on pterosaurs to sustain himself. Nova is a bit taken aback upon hearing that Zeke eats pterosaurs, as they seem rather small to be a main food source. But Zeke assures him that he targets the larger ones. This excites Nova, who begins to wonder if Zeke possesses some kind of special hunting technique. After thinking it over, Zeke decides to reveal his method for catching prey. He instructs Nova to pay close attention, then lies flat on the ground, pretending to be lifeless. Zeke explains the logic behind this tactic and how it helps him lure in unsuspecting creatures. He asks if the idea sounds clever. Nova pauses for a moment, then asks how long Zeke usually waits. Zeke admits he stays still for as long as it takes until a prey comes near. However, that day, Zeke doesn't manage to catch a single one. As night falls, both of them lie under a tree, preparing to sleep. Zeke feels a quiet sense of embarrassment for failing in front of the kid, even on the very first day. Still, he holds onto the hope that tomorrow will be different. He recalls the words of Nova's father, words about never giving up. As Zeke tries to draw strength from those memories, a familiar voice creeps in, this time coming from Wilson. The voice, cold and discouraging, whispers that Zeke is cursed to have ended up on such a forsaken island and will eventually die alone. According to this inner voice, nothing has changed, even with the arrival of Nova. It presses the idea that he now has someone to feed. Zeke tries to silence the voice, but it reminds him that he can't shut it off. It's the darkness that lives inside him. The voice warns him that his happiness and excitement won't last, because there's simply nothing more to this island. Though Zeke grows increasingly irritated, he doesn't respond. Instead, he listens quietly as the voice continues to mock him, calling him a useless old man. Eventually, the voices grow quiet. Zeke, mentally drained, decides to go to sleep. And like that, the first night passes, but the next day arrives with more surprises. As they wake up, the duo is shocked to see a massive triceratops washed up on the shore, and not just any, but a particularly large one. It's been ages since Zeke last saw something that huge beast like this. It feels almost as if the universe is rewarding him for enduring all those days of hunger. Zeke approaches the carcass, gives it a quick sniff, and realizes it's fairly fresh, safe enough even for the little one to eat. But then, a troubling thought creeps into his mind. Perhaps this creature too was swept here by the same storm that brought Nova. Meanwhile, Nova jumps around in joy, his excitement reminding Zeke of the boy's earlier words about good days following bad ones. Though Zeke doesn't necessarily buy into Nova's wisdom, he finds comfort in the boy's enthusiasm and sense of wonder. Putting everything else aside, they both start devouring the massive corpse, fully immersed in the moment. So caught up in the feast, they continue eating for nearly half the day, until Nova feels like he's about to throw up. Turning to ask what they should do next, Nova is surprised to see Zeke lying flat, fast asleep. For the first time in ages, Zeke sleeps soundly, his stomach full and his body finally relaxed. Nova tries to wake him, but the old man doesn't budge. Realizing it's no use, Nova decides to take a short walk around on his own. The shore is eerily quiet, and as Nova strolls, he remembers how his dad never let him walk alone like this. The memory stirs something inside him, a bit of sadness creeping in as he wonders when, if ever, he'll see his father again. After all, even Zeke has been trapped on this island for 20 years. Just then, a thunderous roar shatters the silence. Nova looks up and sees a Quetzalcoatlus soaring straight toward him. Back in the woods, Zeke suddenly wakes up and is alarmed to find Nova gone. Panic grips him. Then, he hears Nova's scream, calling out for help. A terrible thought flashes through Zeke's mind that he's already too late. Without hesitation, he bolts toward the voice, calling out for Nova as he runs. When he finally reaches the shore, he freezes in horror. The Quetzalcoatlus is already midway, its massive beak wide open, and Nova halfway inside it. Zeke's eyes widen in shock as he watches the monstrous creature tilt his head back. Right in front of him, the beast swallows Nova whole, not even a decade old and Bro's already dying. Seeing that, Zeke's mind races with thoughts that he might be too late to save the little fella, and it feels like the bad days his inner voice warned him about have arrived. Consumed by rage, Zeke gathers all his strength and charges straight toward the Quetzalcoatlus, which suddenly notices the massive T-Rex heading its way. As Zeke nears, the bird decides to take flight and quickly ascends into the air. Zeke, moving with furious speed, tries to take a bite at the creature, but it's already too late. The Quetzalcoatlus gains some distance, soaring higher into the sky. But Zeke, filled with rage and determination to save the little fella, leaps into the air with everything he has. He manages to grab onto the bird's wing and sink his teeth into it, bringing the creature crashing to the ground. The Quetzalcoatlus screams in pain as Zeke stomps on it, his eyes burning with a terrifying, monstrous intensity. After that, Zeke doesn't remember what happens next. Let's take a step back and look at Nova's background. Back on the mainland, Nova was deeply attached to his parents, especially his father. One day, Nova asked what they would do next, and together, he and his father decided to go on a journey. When his father asked where he wanted to go, Nova expressed a desire to travel to the end of the world. During that journey, his father taught him the importance of never giving up and never losing hope, no matter what happens. According to him, the moment Nova loses hope, everything will collapse like a chain of falling dominoes, and it will all come to an end. Returning to the present, Nova is trapped inside the bird's throat, barely holding on as his father's words echo in his mind. Meanwhile, outside, Zeke manages to take down the monstrous bird. He tears it apart and pulls Nova out from within. As Nova regains consciousness, he sees Zeke hovering over him, screaming his name and checking if he's awake. At first, Nova thinks he might be dead, but then he realizes something extraordinary has just happened. Zeke reveals everything to Nova about what just happened, leaving him completely shocked. Nova looks at the bird's torn-up throat and struggles to believe that just moments ago, he was trapped inside it. Seeing Nova's disbelief, Zeke explains that if he had been even a second late, the bird would have swallowed Nova alive. It was pure luck that he managed to grab hold of the creature before it flew off. Otherwise, Nova would have been as good as gone. As Nova trembles, still processing what he just heard, Zeke begins to question how such a strange creature ended up on such a remote island. Creatures like that are supposed to remain on the continent. Then it hits him. The body of the Triceratops must have lured the bird in. The scent of the rotting carcass likely drew these massive predators across the sea. Realizing the danger, Zeke quickly decides to eat the rest of the Triceratops' corpse to avoid attracting any more birds. But just as he's about to act, he hears the little guy thanking him. Nova, despite everything, is suddenly full of excitement and reveals that he wants to be like Zeke when he grows up. This response catches Zeke off guard. Just moments ago, Nova was inside a creature's stomach, and now he's smiling with admiration. Zeke pauses for a moment, unsure how to respond, while Nova waits eagerly for his answer. Then, to Nova's surprise, Zeke warns him not to follow in his footsteps. Nova has a goal to leave this place, and Zeke knows he still has a chance to live a different life. Zeke then takes Nova back to their resting place for a serious discussion. Nova feels a bit confused, but Zeke insists it's something important. According to Zeke, they need to find clues that could help them return to the mainland. Hearing this, Nova's mouth falls open in disbelief. Zeke continues, explaining that it might be painful, but he needs Nova's memories. Nova hesitates, unsure, prompting Zeke to clarify that he needs to know what happened to Nova before he ended up on the island and how it all unfolded. Nova is taken aback by the question, while Zeke silently reflects on the storm that brought Nova there. It was different from the usual ones that passed through the region. This storm brought many things, debris, bodies, and Nova himself. If they can piece together what really happened during that storm, Zeke believes they might have a chance to return to the mainland. Despite some hesitation, Nova prepares to share his story. He's unsure where to begin, but Zeke reassures him that he can start wherever he feels most comfortable. Taking a breath, Nova begins with his very first memory, hatching in his nest. Bro starts recapping everything from his birth. As Nova hatched from his egg, the first thing he saw was his mother standing in front of him, watching over the remaining eggs, waiting for the others to hatch. Zeke is stunned upon hearing that Nova remembers events from the moment of his birth. However, Nova, in his innocence, assumes that this was exactly what Zeke wants from him, so he continues without hesitation. Understanding this, Zeke quietly apologizes for the interruption and encourages him to carry on. Nova recalls that after hatching, there hadn't been much to highlight at first. Those had been peaceful days. He played with his mother and siblings, often riding on her back. She took care of them, fed them well, and they ate together. They slept huddled up, enjoying their daily routine in peace. Until Mother dies. A plot twist darker than finding out Eren Yeager committed global genocide to save humanity. Zeke is visibly shaken by the sudden shift in the story and is caught off guard by the dark turn. Nova, trying to calm the tension, explains that it all happened so suddenly. One day, while hunting for food, his mother was struck by a Triceratops. Its horn pierced through her, slamming her into the ground where she died on the spot. The young ones, hidden nearby, came out in confusion, struggling to process what had just happened. From that day, everything began to spiral from bad to worse. Within days, Nova lost all his siblings. Some were taken by birds. Others fell prey to different dinosaurs. The horror continued until, eventually, Nova was left completely alone. He believed it was the end as hope faded, until one day, he encountered a massive wandering T-Rex. Despite its size and intimidating presence, this was the one who, according to Nova, eventually became his father. The T-Rex was initially surprised to find this little survivor wandering alone and silently wondered who this tiny creature was. Nova led the T-Rex to his mother's carcass and explained what had happened. The T-Rex, understanding the situation, stared at the remains in silence for a long time. Then, after confirming Nova's name, he revealed a shocking truth. He was Nova's father. Bro really said, "I'm your dad," after pulling the ultimate milk speedrun. He offered Nova a place by his side if he had nowhere else to go. Without thinking too much, Nova agreed. And from that moment on, his journey with his father began. Nova's father turned out to be an absolute force of nature. He slammed Triceratops around like they were nothing more than oversized chickens and hunted with terrifying efficiency. Nova quickly realized that this dinosaur who claimed to be his dad was far stronger than his mother, especially when it came to fighting horned or heavily armored dinosaurs. He showed no bias. He took down all kinds of creatures without hesitation. Even larger and stronger predators fled at the mere sight of him. But in the end, it never mattered. His father always took them down. Watching him hunt, Nova was amazed. He had never seen anyone so powerful and dominant before. His father also taught him many things that his mother never had the chance to, like what kinds of prey were safe to eat, how to hunt them, and which creatures should be avoided at all costs. He even taught Nova how to move undetected and navigate dangerous areas. Sometimes his father talked about things that felt too deep for Nova to understand. One day, he asked Nova what he thought the most important thing in life was. Nova didn't quite understand the question, but his father didn't mind. He gently explained that life never stopped. Along the way, they experienced fear, pain, and grief, but also joy, happiness, and excitement. Nova listened, standing there clueless, but his father seemed to understand. He knew Nova might not grasp it all right then, and that was okay. Despite knowing that whenever his father shared wisdom, he was always serious, yet also a little happy while explaining it, Nova still followed with curiosity. That day, while passing on another bit of wisdom, his father took Nova somewhere special. At first, Nova was surprised when they passed their usual resting spot, but his father assured him that they were heading to a place worth seeing. After a while, Nova was left in awe. In front of him lay a massive field filled with flowers of every color and kind. He could hardly believe his eyes. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. But just as everything seemed to be going well, the journey with his father came to an unexpected and sudden end. The storm Zeke had seen days ago finally arrived. The wind and rain hit hard, fierce, and unrelenting, flooding the entire land. Nova clung to his father as the water kept rising, and for the first time, he saw fear in his father's eyes. The river had swelled faster than expected, and there was no dry land or nearby hills in sight to escape to. That was when Nova realized how serious things had become. Just when it seemed hopeless, they spotted a small mound barely rising above the water's surface, with logs and debris piled on top. His father placed Nova on the largest log, trying to give him some safety. Looking up at the raging sky, his father seemed to accept that he might not survive. He turned to Nova one last time, reminding him of the lessons he had passed on, the importance of holding on, of never losing hope. He believed Nova would be able to survive and do well on his own. Though Nova started to grow emotional, his father remained calm, assuring him that every life had its struggles, and this was his. No matter what happened, he told Nova to stay strong and promise that they would meet again someday. As the water continued to rise, swallowing everything in its path, a powerful wave crashed into them. It was at that moment that Nova lost his father. He looked around frantically, but there was nothing, only endless water. His father was gone, and just like that, Nova drifted alone, carried by the current until they eventually washed up on the island. It marks the end of Nova's story. However, when he looks at Zeke to see if he's been listening, to his surprise, Zeke is already asleep. He's gone AFK mid-fight, completely knocked out. With a sigh of mild disappointment, Nova turns his gaze toward the moon. In its soft glow, he remembers what his father once told him about never losing hope. No matter how deep the despair, he must hold on to faith even in the darkest times. His father's words echo in his mind that the moment he loses hope, he loses everything. Just like poor Wilson, who gave up and now exists only as a skull, a silent reminder of what happens when hope fades. Exhausted, Nova lies down beside Zeke and finally drifts off to sleep. After a few days, the Triceratops' corpse is now almost entirely reduced to bones, thanks to the old man, Zeke, relentlessly munching away at it. Even little Nova notices and wonders if Zeke has eaten it a bit quicker than he was supposed to. Zeke explains that it was better to consume it quickly than to let its scent attract predatory birds. Hearing this, Nova understands the reasoning, but he still finds it curious. He feels safe with Zeke, so he doesn't fully grasp why Zeke acted so urgently. Zeke brushes off the concern, calling it a precautionary effort. Now that they've completely consumed the Triceratops, the two must begin searching for a new food source to ration. But this time, it's no longer just about survival. They begin to consider something more important, a plan to escape the island. My bro thinks he's let me know dog meme. Zeke is still shocked that Nova was swept away by the storm and asks how long it took him to reach the island. From this, Zeke hopes to calculate the distance they might be from the mainland, assuming Nova can remember. Nova begins recalling his time on the log, how he fell into the water a few times but managed to climb back up each time. Exhausted, he eventually collapsed completely. Nova is unsure if it all took a day or just half of one, to which Zeke asks if the first thing Nova saw when he woke up was the island. Nova confirms this, which leads Zeke to assume that if the storm hit both the island and the mainland at the same time and lasted for 2 days, Nova must have arrived after it, suggesting the island is likely a night's distance away. Zeke isn't entirely sure, but it's the best guess he can offer. Nova feels a bit excited hearing this, but Zeke points out that the real problem isn't the distance, it's the currents of the water. Zeke decides to think about it later, knowing that finding a way out won't be easy. However, with both of them together, the worry doesn't feel as heavy. Afterward, they decide to eat. Nova hunts for his own food, while Zeke uses his own method to catch larger prey. Throughout the day, they manage to gather food this way, and as night falls, they discuss their plans to escape. That night, Zeke teaches Nova how they can use the central star to figure out directions. Nova can't quite make sense of it, but Zeke knows that someday it will prove its worth. Everything is leading up to the day they will return to the mainland. However, something unexpected happens. As the days pass quickly, it is now the 20th day since Nova arrived. Zeke has just told Nova about the distance they must cover between the island and the mainland, which is roughly one night's journey. Hearing this, Nova wonders if swimming would be enough to get across, but Zeke agrees it could work, though the real problem is the waves. The waves are flowing from the mainland to the island, making it difficult to navigate. This is a major concern. But there's another issue that Nova notices in Zeke's eyes: hunger. Amid all the excitement of escaping the island, it's something they've forgotten. Nova, noticing this, asks if Zeke is alright, as he hasn't seen him eat in the past few days. Zeke dismisses it as bad luck, claiming that it's normal for him to go 3 days without food. Despite Zeke's assurances, Nova still asks if he's sure he's fine. Zeke recalls Nova's father's words about not losing hope and that things will turn around. Nova, still worried, offers to catch something for Zeke, but quickly realizes that it won't be enough for someone as hungry as him. Zeke, feeling the same way, decides to try his technique again to lure something in for food. As Zeke lies down as bait, Nova brings him a bird to eat. Zeke dismisses it, saying it's too little to fill him up. Not backing down, Nova brings more birds, which concerns Zeke. He realizes that Nova is giving him all the catch, leaving nothing for himself. Nova is genuinely concerned for Zeke, as the last day passed with him starving as well. Zeke, however, insists that he won't eat until he catches something bigger himself. He reassures himself that he'll be fine, as he's done this before, and is hopeful that if he can hold on just a little longer, things will turn around. Zeke doesn't want to give up. With Nova by his side, he feels a bit of hope that he hasn't felt in the past 20 years, and he clings to the hope that things will improve. By the end of the 28th day since Nova's arrival, it also marks the 12th day of starvation for the old man. Zeke, feeling like skin and bones, can't even remember the last time he ate. It's so bad that he's resorted to crushing the remaining bones to suck out the last drops of marrow. Now, even that is gone, and he hasn't seen a single large pterosaur in days. Zeke has never gone without food for this long, and he doesn't know how much longer he can endure. He knows he can last only 3 or 4 more days at most. Losing hope and willpower, Zeke turns toward the sleeping Nova nearby. He looks at him with a manic expression, then calls out to him, asking if he can catch something for him like he did before. Zeke is fighting an internal battle, with voices in his head pushing him to do something he doesn't want to. He knows that whatever Nova catches won't be enough to satisfy him, realizing he has no other choice. Zeke opens his mouth, inching closer to Nova. But just as he gets close, he is shocked to see Nova's eyes snap open. Zeke hesitates, but the voices in his head begin to push him toward devouring little Nova. They urge him to think only of his own survival, claiming that this small creature's life cannot possibly be more important than his own. As Zeke's jaws inch closer and closer, he suddenly snaps and bites down. The sound jolts Nova awake. To his surprise, he sees that Zeke has bitten his own tail instead. Zeke is determined not to surrender something as simple as hunger. He refuses to give in, even if it means dying. As he fights a brutal battle within himself, Nova notices his strange behavior and begins observing closely. Zeke, in a moment of inner struggle, tries to keep himself composed. He bites off the end of his tail, forcing himself to focus and endure the pain. He believes that losing a small part of his body is a small price to pay for not losing control. Inside, Zeke wrestles with the agony but keeps reminding himself that pain is only temporary. If he can endure this today, he tells himself, he can figure something out for tomorrow, perhaps catch that sea lizard he saw in the water earlier. Just as he's about to bite off more, Nova suddenly yells at him to stop, claiming that he's found a way to fill his stomach. Zeke, startled, immediately lets go of his tail, shocked and confused by Nova's words. Still in disbelief, he tries to determine whether Nova is just saying this to stop him. Nova, though hesitant, insists that he knows a way for Zeke to get full and that they can find food there. Despite his doubts, Zeke chooses to trust this little fella, at least for now. The situation had grown so dire that even Nova began to notice how bad things were becoming. Zeke's bait attempts prove useless, going 5 or 6 days without catching a single thing. He refused to eat smaller creatures like birds or lizards, even though they might have helped ease his hunger. Nova suspected Zeke might have been too embarrassed to eat such things in front of him, which was why he acted the way he did. This starvation continued for days, and Zeke's condition worsened. At one point, he was seen floundering around in the water, desperately trying to catch anything, with no pterosaurs left to hunt in the area. Nova realized then that Zeke might have reached his limit. To make things even more concerning, Zeke began talking to his old imaginary friend, his Scully companion, Wilson, arguing with him as if he were real. Nova watched it all unfold, deeply worried. He recalled what his father once told him: hunger can break even the strongest minds. Despite racking his brain for a solution, Nova found himself coming up empty. 2 more days passed like this. One night, after filling his own stomach and drifting off to sleep, Nova realized Zeke was missing. Even in his half-conscious state, his mind continued searching for a solution. Suddenly, a thought struck him. He remembered the long-necked bird that once tried to eat him. According to Zeke, those birds were drawn to the smell of corpses. Nova recalled this and began to wonder if that kind of scent worked on land. Could it work in water too? When he shares this idea with Zeke, the big fella immediately understands. They can use blood to lure the water lizards. Acting on this, Zeke dips his tail into the water and waits. But nothing happens. As minutes pass, Nova grows desperate. The silence in the water begins to feel like confirmation that the plan has failed. He didn't test this idea beforehand, and now both of them are placing their hopes on it. Zeke, standing still in the water, begins to lose hope as well. The surface remains calm, still, and empty. Nova nervously imagines what might happen if they don't catch anything today. Then something stirs. A ripple breaks the silence. Zeke reacts instantly, attacking the movement with all his strength. His jaws clamp down, and when he pulls out of the water, he reveals a writhing water lizard. He doesn't let go until the creature stops moving. He drags it out of the water, stunned that the plan has actually worked. Nova cheers in excitement, thrilled that their idea paid off. For the first time in days, they don't have to rely on luck. But just as things start to feel hopeful again, Zeke freezes. He drops the fish and stares wide-eyed at Nova. A surge of panic runs through him. Without hesitation, he screams for Nova to get out of the water. Nova, confused, turns towards Zeke and then sees the reason for his fear. Another lizard fish is charging straight at him. The creature leaps from the water with its jaws wide open, and as it closes in on Nova, Zeke desperately screams in the background. As the old man ran toward them, the lizard lunged at Nova. This little fella barely dodged the lizard's jaws by jumping to the side. The lizard, caught off guard, started wiggling its fins in frustration, while Nova, realizing he just survived by inches, bolted away screaming. The lizard noticed his tiny body running off, and to Nova's horror, it started chasing him on land. He looked back, absolutely stunned. Ain't no way the fish just downloaded legs mid-fight. The creature is literally crawling after him using its strange fins, and doing so at an alarming speed. So alarming, in fact, that it manages to catch up to Nova just as he tumbles while running. As the fish is about to make him its next meal, Zeke charges in and yeets it out with a powerful swing of his tail. The lizard goes flying like a home run and crashes into the water. Turning quickly toward Nova, Zeke checks to see if he's okay. Nova gets to his feet and confirms that he's fine. With that, the two of them finally enjoy a calm moment, feasting on the strange lizard fish after days of starvation. The meat turns out to be surprisingly tasty. A true breath of fresh air, or in Zeke's case, a breath of much-needed meat. Nova, however, remains concerned about Zeke's tail, but Zeke assures him that it's fine. The bleeding has already stopped. Nova is a bit surprised to hear that, especially after seeing Zeke bite into his own tail and then use it like a baseball bat, yet it's still intact. Zeke explains that his size plays a huge role. Compared to Nova, he's much larger, which grants him significantly greater durability and healing ability. According to him, the bigger a creature is, the stronger its endurance and recovery rate. Larger beasts like Triceratops and others possess tough resistance against scratches and piercings, and even if they're injured, they can recover with relative ease and survive. Zeke also points out that the lizard he just flung away might still be alive. They don't know for sure. Using this as a lesson, he explains the importance of finishing off prey during a hunt, as letting it escape could become dangerous later. Nova reflects on this, comparing it to how he was swallowed alive but still managed to escape unharmed. Zeke confirms the comparison, and Nova then wonders aloud about how that lizard fish was able to move on land like that. Zeke admits it's also the first time he's witnessed such behavior, something aquatic managing to crawl on land. He mentions they're quite rare and that he's only ever seen a few in his life, some near the shore, and a few others wash up dead on the beach. As Nova wonders what else this old fella doesn't know, Zeke thanks him for discovering a new method of finding food. He admits that in his 20 years of surviving, he never thought of an idea like that, yet Nova, just a kid, managed to do it. Nova, flustered, brushes it off as a simple observation and gives Zeke partial credit, saying he was the one who actually made it happen. Nova also remembers that they should save a bit of the corpse for next time to use it as bait. Zeke agrees, and just like that, they've discovered another way to secure food. It's a bit wild, but it's how they managed to survive that day, dodging starvation and gaining new experience and lessons in the process. However, nature, without a hint of mercy, brews something else for them, bringing forth a few Triceratops drifting through the water, while a heavy, unseen predator lurks in the depths, ready to strike. These two Triceratops brothers are struggling to make their way back to land. They try their best to swim away from the predator, but it's getting increasingly difficult. Suddenly, the worst happens. The massive beast lunges out of the water with its mouth wide open and snatches one of the Triceratops, dragging him down into the depths. The surviving brother is left confused and horrified, realizing too late that his sibling has already been taken. Terrified and disoriented, the remaining Triceratops wonders how he ended up in this situation in the first place. He remembers peacefully picking seaweed, like he always does, when the monstrous fish appeared out of nowhere and attacked. Now, his brother is being torn apart deep underwater by the predator and other carnivorous sea creatures. Lost in the middle of the ocean, he prays for a glimpse of land, any chance to survive. Then he finally spots something in the distance. Back on the island, morning arrives. It's now been 45 days since Nova came to the island. Both Nova and Zeke are resting under the shade of a tree, though quiet tension lingers between them. Cold War that began a few days ago. 5 days earlier, on the 40th day since Nova's arrival, the breakthrough changed everything. For the first time in 20 years, the island's food problem was more or less solved. Using the trick taught by Nova, Zeke was able to catch food again. Up until then, they had been on good terms. And now, they no longer suffer from hunger, managing to catch sea predators like sharks and sea lizards. However, even with the food problem behind them, one issue still remained: the challenge of escaping the island. Nova couldn't understand why Zeke insisted that escaping the island was impossible, as Zeke always blamed the ocean currents. According to him, the flow from the mainland to the island was stronger than their swimming ability, meaning they'd be pushed back if they tried to cross. But now, Nova had grown tired of hearing the same excuse and lashed out, claiming they'd made zero progress because of this issue. Zeke brushed off Nova's frustration, realizing he was still just a kid and thinking like one. Nova argued that if they swam faster than the current, they might have a chance to reach the mainland. However, Zeke explained the real problem. They weren't natural swimmers like turtles or crocodiles. They were land animals, and Zeke insisted that he had tried many times over a decade ago, but nothing ever worked. Nova snapped back, shouting that Zeke had never once mentioned that he had attempted to swim before. Zeke seemed confused, swearing he must have brought it up at some point, but Nova had heard enough. From his perspective, Zeke never really tried anything and always blamed the waves instead of putting in the effort. Zeke fired back, accusing Nova of simply whining and trying to take the easy way out. He reminded Nova that when he first arrived, he himself had claimed the island was the best place he had ever seen. They both started screaming at each other, caught in a heated argument. Zeke reminded Nova that he had saved him twice and claimed that Nova couldn't survive without him. Nova yelled back, insisting that it was he who had helped Zeke find food in the first place. Frustrated, he decided to leave and make it out on his own. Hearing that, Zeke felt a wave of disappointment. He knew Nova couldn't swim, so attempting to leave the island alone would be impossible. And just like that, the two of them ended up in a cold war that had now lasted 5 days. Back to the present, Zeke is saddened that Nova won't even look at the meat he offered as an apology. Nova has been surviving on his own during these 5 days, refusing any help. Zeke reflects on his aging body, but reminds himself that his willpower stretches far beyond his years. He wonders how long Nova will stay angry with him. For a brief moment, Zeke considers the idea of swimming to the mainland with Nova, but quickly brushes it aside. Realizing the journey would be filled with dangerous creatures and powerful waves, he drifts back to sleep, thinking that if Nova were to get into trouble again, he wouldn't be able to stand by and let it happen. Meanwhile, Nova sits on Zeke, wondering if his father is out there somewhere, searching for him. He shakes the thought away, telling himself it no longer matters. What matters now is survival, and this island is slowly breaking him. Nova knows that, deep down, he can't do much without Zeke either. With nothing else to do, he lies down and drifts off to sleep. As both of them sleep, the Triceratops from before washes ashore, breathing heavily in panic. Zeke, meanwhile, is having a rough nap. He's sweating under the trees because he's caught in a terrible nightmare. In it, he sees a horrible vision of himself badly hurt, which is really just his biggest fear about being abandoned playing out. When he suddenly jolts awake, he's super relieved it was only a dream. However, the relief doesn't last. As he looks around, he realizes Nova is gone. Just then, a terrifying scream echoes nearby, making him jump to his feet. He rushes toward the sound and finds Nova absolutely freaking out, face to face with that new equally startled armored dinosaur. Startled, Nova scrambles away while Zeke runs over, totally confused by the impossible situation. The new dinosaur looks completely wiped out and can barely catch its breath. Meanwhile, Nova points toward the strange creature with confusion and unease written all over him. The old-timer studies the newcomer closely, his mind racing to make sense of how an armored dinosaur could have ended up on their island. Maybe the tides brought it here, or maybe it swam all the way on its own. Either way, its arrival changes everything. Nova stays close to the old-timer, hiding behind his leg as the creature takes slow, trembling breaths. Both of them are pretty surprised to see something like that, with that kind of armor and tail. Studying it for a bit, Zeke glances at Nova, and with just one look, they both realize they might be in some weird shit here. With that, Zeke suggests the big fella hold on for now. Day 46 after Nova arrived, and things are just getting weirder. The stranger's been hanging around the island like he owns the place, probably trapped here too, just chilling and grazing like it's a vacation spot. Nova, though, hates every second of it. When Zeke makes it clear he's not planning to do anything about their new neighbor, the little dino can't believe his ears. According to the old-timer, this newcomer isn't just some random beast they can gang up on. He's built different, literally. Way bigger, heavily armored, and definitely not the type you want to mess with when he's on edge. Even exhausted, the guy's got his defenses up. So Zeke decides to chill and keep his distance for now, which to Nova basically screams coward mode activated. Nova's pacing and frustration convince the old guy's lost his spark. In his head, Zeke's just sitting around being scared of the new tank that washed up, not even thinking of ways to get off this cursed island. Meanwhile, Zeke's lying nearby, totally aware Nova's got thoughts but pretending he doesn't notice. Classic "I'm not dealing with this drama today" energy. The truth is, Zeke's got his reasons. He knows he can't fight that massive newcomer right now as one wrong move and he's done for. Plus that big dude's always alert, like he's running on pure paranoia and caffeine. So Zeke's just accepted the situation for what it is. It is what it is level acceptance. Deep down, he knows how this kind of setup goes. A bunch of hungry creatures, limited space, no escape. Sooner or later, someone's gonna snap. As the newcomer leaves the pond, Nova just stares, completely horrified. The place looks like a crime scene made of mud. Meanwhile, the armored newcomer eventually dozes off nearby, snoring like a busted engine, until he suddenly jerks awake at the sound of birds screeching. Turns out it's just Zeke out there hunting the bird dinosaurs again, basically treating the island like his personal KFC. The newcomer, still half asleep, instantly goes on high alert, and Zeke realizes the guy probably thinks he's coming in for a fight. Days pass and the tension doesn't fade, it just marinates. Everyone's nerves are shot, and Nova keeps wondering if things will ever go back to normal, whatever normal even means anymore. The vibe is off, the trust is gone, and honestly, it's starting to feel like one of those bad roommate situations where no one talks but everyone's silently judging. It's day 50 since Nova's arrival, and the sky just opens up. Rain pours down hard, drenching the island. Zeke's caught off guard by how intense it is, but shrugs it off, figuring it was about time. Normally the rain means trouble, floods, slippery ground. The whole nature said no experience. But luckily Zeke's belly is full from yesterday's hunt, so he's just chilling. As he sits there lost in thought, he can't help but think about the newcomer. Where'd that tank of a creature go? Maybe deeper into the jungle. The question barely settles when, somewhere deep within the trees, the newcomer's eyes snap open, stirred awake by the sound of crashing waves in the distance. Something's definitely about to go down. Meanwhile, back with Zeke, he's thinking about Nova, wondering where the little guy wandered off to, especially as the storm ramps up. Zeke's low-key stressed, but he's trying to play it cool. Out in the trees, the newcomer spots the massive waves crashing in and immediately loses it, screaming, thudding, running in circles like someone just told him the Wi-Fi is down forever. Zeke hears the chaos and freezes, wondering why is this big guy losing his mind now. Meanwhile, he's also worried about Nova, as Storm plus Panic Tank Dino is not the ideal combo. Before he can even process what's happening, the newcomer bolts straight past him, nearly clipping Zeke's leg. That only adds to the confusion. But as Zeke glances toward the dark horizon, watching the waves build higher and higher, it hits him. The creature isn't crazy, it's terrified. And then he sees why. A massive wave, taller than anything he's ever seen, surges forward. There's no time to react as it crashes against the shore with brutal force, swallowing everything in its path. How did this happen? Well, 1 hour earlier, Nova was off on his own, hunting whatever he could catch. He was still angry at Zeke though, frustrated and a bit weirded out by the old guy. Not to mention the strange newcomer on the other side of the island. As the rain began to pour, Nova wandered aimlessly until he spotted a small nest tucked inside a massive tree. Deciding it was as good a shelter as any, he crawled in to wait out the storm. The sound of the rain soon lulled him to sleep, his last thought drifting toward how much longer he'd be stuck on this island. Meanwhile, Zeke isn't so lucky. Back at the shore, the old giant is caught in the massive wave that crashes without warning. Dragged under by the violent current, he can't even shout for help. He thrashes desperately, fighting to reach the surface with his lungs burning for air. When he finally breaks through the water, he gasps and looks around in shock, trying to make sense of what just happened. It feels like a tsunami has hit, sweeping him far from land. As he scans the horizon, he catches a glimpse of the island, but it's almost completely submerged beneath the raging sea. Panic sets in as his thoughts immediately turn to Nova, wondering where could he be or is he still alive. Without hesitation, Zeke dives back into the water, determined to find him. But he knows one wrong move could mean the end. Still, with what strength he has left, the old dino swims toward where the island used to be, pushing through the storm with everything he's got. Meanwhile, on the island, the massive wave swallows nearly everything, leaving only the treetops visible above the churning water. Deep inside one of those trees, Nova, our little fellow, abruptly wakes up, sensing something's wrong. The air feels heavy, and the sound of rushing water grows louder by the second. Before he can even process it, cold water starts flooding into the nest. Confused and panicked, he looks around, wondering where it's all coming from. But as reality sinks in, he realizes exactly what's happening. The island is being swallowed whole. He tries to escape, but it's already too late. The nest shakes violently as water bursts in, submerging everything in an instant. Out in the open sea, Zeke keeps fighting his way back. His massive tail cuts through the waves as he pushes forward, each stroke fueled by the thought of finding Nova. Inside his mind, he keeps repeating the same words. Keep going, don't stop. The storm is brutal, but Zeke's determination keeps him afloat. He focuses on a rhythm, deep breath, dive, swim forward, surface for air. It's working. Slowly, he feels himself closing the distance. Through the chaos, he finally spots what's left of the island ahead. But back inside the flooded tree, Nova is struggling for his life. The water keeps rising, filling every gap in the nest, making it harder and harder for the little guy to escape. Outside, Zeke somehow manages to make it back onto the island, even though he can't believe it. The first thing he does, after catching his breath, is look for Nova. But the little guy is still trapped inside the flooded nest. Following his instincts, Zeke rams into one of the trees, and with a brutal shove, it cracks and collapses. To his surprise, Nova tumbles out, but he's unconscious. Zeke stands there in worry until he sees the faint rise and fall of Nova's chest. The little one coughs, eyes fluttering open, realizing his big companion actually came back to save him. After a while, the storm fades and the water slowly retreats back into the sea, leaving behind shattered trees and a torn-up island. Nova takes it all in, stunned by the sheer scale of destruction. The old-timer, though calm, can't help but think about how much of the island is now underwater. As he drifts into thought, Nova notices fish scattered and thrashing along the shore, like free food dropped from the sky. Just as things start to quiet down, the newcomer, the Denversaurus, drags itself out of the water, alive. Both Zeke and Nova stare in surprise, while Nova silently wonders how something that massive managed to swim through that storm. According to Zeke, creatures like that are usually found close to the shore, and they're pretty good swimmers. Still, the newcomer looks exhausted, like he's been fighting the waves for a long time just to reach land. That alone confuses them, since these kinds of creatures can normally handle water with ease. Zeke watches for a moment, then shakes off the thought and prepares to strike. If Nova wants him to take the creature down, he'll do it. Meanwhile, the newcomer continues to struggle in the surf, barely managing to stay afloat as he inches toward the island. Zeke can tell the guy won't go down easily, but deep down, something in him hesitates. He just can't bring himself to kill a creature that's already fighting for its life. He waits, watching it get closer. Then, out of nowhere, a massive aquatic dinosaur bursts from the water and bites the newcomer, dragging it up and out of sight. Both Zeke and Nova freeze in complete shock, unable to process what they've just witnessed. Nova can't believe it. Ever since he was born on this planet, he's had his fair share of wild, unforgettable moments. But ever since washing up on this island, everything he's seen feels like a whole new level of chaos. Watching that massive predator drag the newcomer into the sea without warning is something he'll never forget. Eventually, the storm passes, and somehow both he and Zeke make it out alive. But the damage it leaves behind is massive. As Zeke walks along the shore, he takes in the destruction. Half the island now swallowed by the ocean, the other half torn apart by waves and wind. Nova, still shaken, realizes just how close he came to death. The image of the newcomer being snatched by that sea monster keeps replaying in his head. What really catches his attention, though, is how calm the old-timer looks through all of it. Thinking back, Nova remembers him warning them about the Mosasaurus, the same creature that probably dragged the newcomer under. Maybe that's what he was trying to warn them about all along. All these thoughts and close calls create a quiet distance between Nova and Zeke. Even the wind feels different now, and Nova can't help but wonder if Zeke somehow knew about that massive creature beforehand. While looking around, Zeke suddenly spots the washed-up body of an Elasmosaurus. To him, it's a lucky find, enough food to last them for days. He gets excited at the discovery, thinking it's their break after all the chaos. But Nova doesn't share the same energy. He's still distant, still processing everything that's happened. Zeke, noticing his mood, tries to keep things positive. At least their pond survived. At least they're both still alive. He's not wrong either, because from above, the island now looks tiny, almost unrecognizable. What was once their home now feels more like a fragile piece of land, barely holding on. Despite Zeke's reassurances, Nova doesn't budge. He just stares back at him with an indifferent expression. Zeke notices right away that something's off, as the little guy was fine just a moment ago, so he starts wondering if he said something wrong. As he's lost in thought, Nova suddenly calls out to him, asking if he knows the real reason they can't leave the island. The question catches Zeke off guard. Feeling uneasy, he tries to brush it off, but Nova doesn't buy it. He insists it was never about the currents, like Zeke once said. It was about those giant sea lizards lurking in the depths. Hearing this, the big guy freezes for a second, taken aback by how serious Nova sounds. Nova's voice rises as he accuses him of hiding the truth, thinking the old-timer kept it from him just so he wouldn't lose hope. The frustration in his tone stings, and Zeke realizes there's a huge misunderstanding between them. Nova feels betrayed, convinced that Zeke lied to him. But in reality, Zeke had told the truth. The real reason they couldn't leave was the powerful ocean currents, not the sea predators. As Zeke processes it all, Nova keeps going, saying that even the newcomer must have sensed the danger in the water, which is why he acted so strangely. It's then that Zeke finally understands. Nova isn't angry because of lies. He's scared of losing hope. And for the first time, Zeke sees the little guy completely break down, weighed down by fear instead of his usual fiery spirit. Taking a deep breath, the old-timer tries to calm Nova down, explaining that there's been a huge misunderstanding in his conclusion. He admits he knew about the sea creatures living in the surrounding waters, but insists they aren't the real obstacle keeping them trapped on the island, and he can swear on that. He explains that a creature his size isn't exactly an easy target for even a sea lizard. At over 10,000 pounds with skin thick enough to break teeth, they wouldn't dare take a bite unless they wanted to hurt themselves. Zeke then reveals that he's made countless escape attempts long before Nova ever arrived, back when he was younger and smaller. Nova still looks at him skeptically, not fully convinced, but the old-timer keeps going. He says he tried everything because he wanted to leave the island just as badly as Nova does, willing to risk his life for even the smallest chance at freedom. But in the end, it was never the predators that stopped him. It was the current. Every time he fought against it, no matter how far he got, the flow always dragged him back, forcing him to return to the island, defeated but alive. Despite Zeke explaining everything in detail, his words don't really register in Nova's tired, foggy mind. Seeing the little guy's blank expression, Zeke cuts himself short and just tells him not to lose hope over things that don't make sense right now, even if everything that's happened is hard to process. As Nova listens, his thoughts drift back to the newcomer. He realizes that the poor creature might have stood a better chance if it had just turned back to shore instead of getting caught by that sea predator. Still, something doesn't add up. How could a creature that good at swimming get taken down so easily? That's when something clicks. In a sudden rush, all the pieces, the talks about escaping, the currents, and their failed attempts, start to line up in Nova's head. Zeke keeps talking, but Nova suddenly bursts out, shouting with excitement as he runs in circles like a maniac. Zeke blinks in confusion, unsure what's gotten into him, until Nova finally blurts it out that he's figured it out. He's found a way to get them off the island. Zeke can't believe what he's hearing and wonders if the little guy is joking. But Nova looks completely serious, confident that he's actually found a way to get them off the island. Seeing that confidence, Zeke suggests him to slow down and ask for proof. He questions how Nova can be so sure when nothing around them seems to have changed. But Nova fires back, shouting that the wind has changed. The word alone makes Zeke pause, something clicking in his mind too. Nova explains further, saying the winds are now blowing from west to east, the exact opposite of before. Zeke glances around and notices the leaves drifting in the same direction. Realizing the little guy's observation is right. Still, deep down, he doubts it'll make much difference. Then Nova brings up the newcomer, reminding Zeke of his own words that those creatures were strong swimmers. Yet the newcomer struggled to reach shore and was taken by a predator without even putting up much of a fight. That part doesn't sit right with him. Zeke frowns, trying to understand, and that's when Nova points out that the newcomer couldn't swim back because the current had changed, just like the wind. That shift might be the very thing that changes everything for them. Hearing that, Zeke can hardly believe it. To test it out for himself, he wades into the water, and to his surprise, the little guy seems to be right. The waves are hitting the shore much softer than before, and when they pull back, the current feels stronger, flowing away faster than usual. Zeke's stunned that he never noticed it earlier, especially after being dragged under by those same waves during the storm. Feeling a bit foolish, he admits that Nova might be right, but suggests they take a lap around the island just to be sure. The little fellow is more than eager to join, and the two set off to explore. As they move along the shoreline, hundreds of pterodactyls fill the sky above them, their wings blotting out parts of the sun. Watching them soar, Zeke wonders if they're migrating, maybe even heading back toward the mainland. Still, he keeps his focus on the sea, noticing how the waves continue shifting direction. It's strange. How could the storm have changed the currents so drastically? In truth, back then, violent volcanic activity and tectonic shifts often triggered sudden changes in ocean flow and climate patterns. But for Zeke and Nova, those details don't matter. All they care about now is that for the first time in a long while, they might actually have a real chance to escape. As they continue looking around, Zeke spots the tail of the newcomer, washed up on shore. The sight makes him pause for a moment, a hint of sadness crossing his face. Shaking it off, he turns his focus back to the task at hand and confirms to Nova that the current really has changed direction. However, there are a couple of not-so-great updates. First, the island is running out of food. Most of the creatures, like the pterodactyls, seem to be migrating after the storm and probably won't be coming back. Second, the island itself appears to be sinking, slowly but surely. This shocks Nova, but Zeke explains further, pointing out that the beach is already narrower compared to the other side of the island. He believes the shifting current might be the cause, and at this rate, they only have a few months before the whole place could end up underwater. Still, the old-timer stays confident, claiming that by the time that happens, they'll already be gone, heading toward the mainland and finally free. His confidence rubs off on Nova, who starts to believe it too. It's now the 50th day since Nova's arrival, and for the first time, the big guy feels a genuine spark of hope that they might actually make it back to the land they once called home. As they rest and talk, their conversation drifts toward what they'll do after returning. Nova, without hesitation, says he'll go looking for his dad. Zeke, on the other hand, has a long list of things he wants to do once they're free, like eating fresh meat again, maybe even hunting something big like a triceratops. Hearing that, Nova suddenly realizes he's never really asked much about Zeke himself. He's always been the one talking about his own life. Curious, he asks how Zeke ended up on the island in the first place. The big guy pauses for a moment, then casually brushes it off, assuring they'll talk about it once they make it back to the mainland. Nova protests, insisting he won't get bored by the details, but Zeke just waves him off again, promising to tell the story later. Inside, though, Zeke feels a little embarrassed. He doesn't think there's anything special about his story, nothing worth sharing right now. But deep down, he'd come to regret that decision, because if he had told Nova right then and there, it might have spared him from the regrets waiting for him in the days ahead. The next day, Nova seems upset again, and Zeke immediately notices. He wonders if the little guy is mad at him once more. But Nova, stubborn as ever, makes it clear that if Zeke wants him to talk, he needs to start answering his questions. Thinking it over, Zeke finally decides to tell his story. From the time he first ended up on the island. It was a dark, lonely period. He had no one, barely any food, and spent days weighed down by his own thoughts. Anger and frustration consumed him, but there was nothing he could do. Every night, he fell asleep, fearing it might be his last. Then Nova showed up, and everything changed. Life on the island, once dull and miserable, suddenly felt brighter, filled with purpose and excitement. The place hadn't changed, but the way he saw it had, all because of that tiny spark of life beside him. Zeke admits that the reason he didn't want to share his story earlier was because he didn't feel as mature as Nova. Despite being older, he feels the little guy is stronger, mentally tougher, and that made him hesitate to open up. As he keeps yapping, he glances over and realizes Nova has already drifted off to sleep halfway through his boring story. Letting out a soft sigh, Zeke lies down beside him with his eyes growing heavy. Before sleep takes him, he quietly promises to tell it all again, once they make it back to the mainland. Just like that, it's now the 55th day since Nova's arrival. For the past 4 days, he and Zeke have been planning and preparing for their grand voyage off the cursed island. They've eaten just enough to keep their strength up for the long swim ahead, careful not to overdo it and weigh themselves down. They've double-checked the direction of the currents and winds and even studied the stars for guidance. As Zeke looks up at the constellations, he can't help but wonder if they look the same over the mainland. While stargazing, his eyes catch sight of the old skull he once called his friend, and a strange feeling washes over him. Nova seems uneasy too, trembling slightly at the eerie sight. Zeke quietly mentions that with everything that's happened, the island seems to be sinking. Once they leave, there'll be no coming back. The thought makes Nova shiver, but he agrees, and together they prepare for their journey to freedom, or at least that's what they believe. Finally, the two step into the water. Before leaving, Zeke turns one last time to say goodbye to his old skull companion Wilson, leaving him behind on the island that had been both their prison and home. After 55 days since Nova's arrival, and 20 long years for Zeke, they finally bid farewell to the island. Out on the open sea, Zeke rides the current with powerful strokes, the flow carrying them steadily toward what they hope is the mainland. Before long, they spot flocks of pterodactyls soaring in the distance, a good sign that land might be near. They estimate it'll take 1 night of travel to reach it. It's not a short journey, but for the first time in forever, both of them are filled with hope. They set off at daybreak, hoping to reach the mainland before sunset. Zeke takes the lead, acting as the boat, while Nova keeps watch for any threats or signs of land. They're following the general direction toward the mainland, but Nova stays alert just in case they drift off course. Throughout the journey, they check the stars to stay aligned, and Zeke feels confident they're on the right path. Having Nova scanning the horizon makes him even more hopeful. For a while, everything seems to be going smoothly. Then Nova notices dark clouds starting to bunch together in the distance, but Zeke stays calm, figuring the waves and currents aren't changing yet, so there's no real danger. Everything looks set for a perfect ending, but nothing ever goes exactly as planned. Soon enough, Nova spots something moving beneath the water. His eyes widen in shock as it's a massive sea predator gliding right beside them, its gaze locked on Zeke. Just like that, their first real obstacle at sea has arrived. This sea lizard is known as Mosasaurus hoffmanni, the largest of its kind during that era, and the undisputed apex predator of the ocean. Its size rivals that of a T-Rex, and with Zeke no longer having to worry about currents, this creature is easily his biggest threat. Spotting it, Zeke stays composed and recalls the plan he made with Nova earlier. With that in mind, he dives beneath the surface, moving carefully as the massive Mosasaurus glides below, watching him like a delicious meal waiting to be claimed. The predator begins circling him, its enormous shadow rippling through the deep blue. Zeke realizes just how massive it truly is. He knew there was always a chance of the currents shifting, but running into one of these beasts was never part of the plan. He remembers the warning he gave Nova before the voyage. From his past encounters, Zeke learned that these sea lizards tend to be more active in low light, especially around sunset. Nova had noticed it too. Every time they'd come across one, it was either dusk or during heavy clouds. That's why they chose to leave at sunrise, hoping to minimize the risk. But even so, Zeke knew that staying alert was their only real defense. He had a plan for this exact situation, and now it's time to put it to the test. Coming back to the situation, just as Zeke predicted, they encounter the Mosasaurus right around sunset. To his surprise, the creature is nearly as massive as he is. It doesn't attack right away, which makes Zeke think it might just be curious. After all, a T-Rex wandering into its territory isn't something it sees every day. He reminds himself to stay calm and stick to the plan, as this might be their only chance to make it through safely. Even if Nova becomes its target, Zeke knows the predator would think twice before attacking with him nearby. When the sea lizard starts getting too close, Zeke decides to give it a warning. He lets out a deep, thunderous roar that echoes through the water. The sound startles the Mosasaurus, and to Zeke's surprise, it actually turns away. Breaking the surface, Zeke and Nova both feel a rush of relief, realizing they did it. The plan worked. For a moment, it feels like they're finally in the clear. With the threat behind them, they keep swimming toward the mainland, realizing they've covered a good chunk of the journey already. The coastline could be just minutes away, but Nova soon notices Zeke's pace slowing down, his strokes becoming heavier. A flicker of worry hits him, wondering if they will really make it to land before the day ends. Despite being close to their goal, neither of them wants to think about what might happen if they don't make it. After swimming for a while, Nova spots something in the distance. He focuses, then bursts with excitement, realizing it's land. Finally, the glimmer of hope they've been chasing for so long. Motivated by the sight, Zeke pushes harder through the water, until at last, his feet touch solid ground for the first time in hours. They both rush forward, stepping onto the shore, but to Nova's surprise, it doesn't look like the mainland, it's another island. Zeke realizes the same thing, but can't shake off an odd feeling about the place. Though disappointed, he tells Nova that it's still progress. They made it off the cursed island, and that's what matters. Inside, though, he knows he has to stay calm and hopeful for Nova's sake. They take a lap around the new island, but the uneasy feeling only grows stronger. The vegetation here isn't normal. There are plants that usually grow deep inland and massive trees lying uprooted as if a tsunami had torn through. Zeke pauses, staring at the destruction as a sudden realization hitting him hard. Without a word, he starts walking back into the water. Nova watches in confusion as the big guy steps deeper into the waves. Then Zeke turns and finally reveals the truth that the island they're standing on isn't a new one at all. It is the mainland, or at least what's left of it. Hearing that, Nova freezes in pure disbelief, unable to process the reality before him. Nova can't believe what Zeke means by that, but the big guy explains that this is in fact the very mainland they'd been aiming for all along, only now it's nothing more than a small fragment of land left above water. Hearing that, Nova is speechless. All the effort, all the planning, all the hope they carried, it feels like it's been washed away with the tides. Zeke continues, pointing out the harsh truth they both overlooked. They were so focused on reaching the mainland that they never considered the state it might be in. The little guy blinks in confusion at the word state, not quite understanding what he means. Zeke explains further. From the night the storm began to the moment Nova arrived, only a single night had passed, and using that as reference, they calculated the distance to the mainland. They spent all their time planning how and when to move, but never once thought about what might have happened to the mainland in the meantime. He reminds Nova that there's a 20-year gap between when he first washed up on the island and when Nova arrived. In all that time, countless storms and floods must have reshaped everything. The floods they survived didn't just hit their island, they likely tore through the mainland as well, changing the landscape entirely. And that's why Zeke explains with a heavy tone, the land they expected to find, their home, is now barely above water, swallowed by the sea over years of endless storms. It's now turned into nothing more than a small patch of land, just the last remnant of what used to be the mainland. Still, Zeke believes the real land might be farther out than they originally thought. But before he can say more, he suddenly starts coughing and vomiting up seawater, making Nova panic as he rushes to his side. It's the 55th day since they've been together, and the harsh truth hits them. They've taken the wrong path. Even so, they push themselves again, hoping to catch even the faintest glimpse of another piece of land. But to their misfortune, there's nothing. Just the endless stretch of deep blue water surrounding them. The next day, they try again, desperate for any sign of hope. Yet once more, there's nothing. No islands, no coastlines, not even a shadow on the horizon. To make matters worse, dark clouds begin to gather, signaling another storm closing in. Despite the crushing disappointment, Zeke forces himself to stand. Looking at the sky, he realizes that before nightfall, the storm will completely sweep the island away, taking everything, including him and Nova, with it. He turns his gaze toward the little fellow peacefully sleeping beside him, and wonders if this is truly how it all ends. In his mind, he keeps asking where things went wrong. Even if they had stayed behind, they would have drowned anyway. The silence that follows is heavy, almost suffocating, as the two remain stranded on their shrinking island, waiting for whatever cruel twist of fate is coming next. Zeke sits in quiet despair, reflecting on his seemingly pointless struggle, while the little guy trembles in his sleep, sensing the hopelessness in the air as the storm approaches. Just then, as Zeke stares at the approaching storm, something clicks in his mind. His eyes widen, and in a burst of excitement, he rushes toward Nova, shouting that he's thought of one last chance to reach the mainland. Nova, startled and half asleep, barely understands what's happening before Zeke yells for him to get moving. They don't have time to waste. Without another word, Zeke starts scanning the area, explaining that they need to find a massive log, fast. It's their only shot at survival. Nova, now understanding the urgency, joins in, and together they manage to drag a large broken tree trunk down to the shore and push it into the water. As they work, Nova finally asks why Zeke is so fixated on the log and what it has to do with reaching the mainland. Zeke points out that when Nova first arrived on the island, he drifted in on a log, and that's exactly the same idea he's trying now. When the storm hits, the waves will pick up tremendous speed, and if they ride the current on the log, it might carry them straight toward the mainland. They just have to hold on until the storm calms down, and if luck's on their side, they'll finally make it home. Nova knows it's all just a huge gamble, but according to Zeke, even his arrival on the island was one big gamble. Still, the little guy struggles to believe their luck will work twice. They'd need a miracle to make it out of this alive, but Zeke refuses to give up. It's the only plan they have, and he's willing to bet everything on it. He reminds Nova of his own words about never losing hope, saying that this plan, no matter how risky, is their only real shot. Nova remains worried, glancing at the darkening clouds, but Zeke urges him to move quickly. There's no time left. They'll have to ride the waves, not face the storm head-on. But just as they're about to set off, the water beneath them erupts. A large mosasaurus bursts out of the depths with its jaws wide open. In one swift strike, it tears through the surface and rips Zeke's arm apart in a single bite. The old giant freezes in shock, blood clouding the water as he watches helplessly, unable to do anything but stand there in horror. Nova notices the blood splattering across the waves and immediately panics, while Zeke realizes it all happened because he let his guard down. He failed to notice the massive beast closing in, and that mistake just cost him his arm. As he struggles to stay calm through the pain, the mosasaurus charges straight at the log, sending Nova tumbling into the water. Zeke, seeing the little guy flailing, shouts for him to get behind him. Nova hesitates, confused for a moment, until Zeke points out the mosasaurus speeding right toward him. In a flash, the creature slams into the log, shattering it in half and sending the broken pieces sinking beneath the waves. Nova fights to stay above water, while Zeke yells at him to get out of there fast. Somehow, the two manage to drag themselves back onto land, but the damage is done. Nova is terrified seeing the big guy's arm completely gone, but Zeke tries to calm him down, saying he'll manage and that he doesn't really need it anyway. Deep down, though, he knows the truth. If he hadn't turned his head at the last second, that bite would have taken his neck instead. As they stand there catching their breath, they find themselves face to face with the massive mosasaurus watching them from the shallows. Zeke studies it closely and realizes they were lucky to survive. The beast is nearly twice the size of the one they encountered the day before. It seems like the whole area has become mosasaurus territory, judging by how often they're appearing. To make things worse, the storm is closing in fast, and with it comes the flood that will soon swallow what's left of the island. Zeke knows the mosasaurus can sense it too, and are likely lurking nearby, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Thinking about all this, the big guy feels his heart pounding in his chest. He has no idea what to do next. After coming this far and putting in so much effort, he can't stand the thought of losing it all now. Soon the storm begins to rage in full force, and Nova watches in fear as the rising waves start to flood the island. In desperation, he looks towards Zeke, who himself looks completely hopeless. Seeing him like that, Nova feels disappointed in himself for not being able to do anything when it matters most. Forcing his mind to think of a solution, he suddenly comes up with an idea. He calls out to Zeke and suggests using himself as bait for the mosasaurus. According to him, the island is sinking anyway, and doing nothing will only seal their fate. But if they lure the creature out, they might have a chance to take it down before it takes them. As he says that, Nova reminds Zeke of his own words from earlier about clinging to that last faint chance no matter how small it seems. He points out that Zeke always tries to carry everything alone, but this time, he wants to help too. Hearing that, the big guy stays quiet for a moment, thinking it over, before finally agreeing to go with Nova's plan. But only on one condition: that Nova has to follow a plan of his own as well. The little fellow quickly agrees, and with that, their bait plan begins. Zeke places Nova on a log and starts pushing him toward the water. But soon Nova realizes something's off. This isn't exactly what they talked about. Meanwhile, Zeke keeps pushing him farther out, insisting that this is the best chance for the little guy to make it out alive. He tells himself that if Nova survives, then it'll count as both of their victory. Just as Nova is about to react, Zeke suddenly gives the log a hard shove, sending him drifting into the waves. The little guy struggles to understand, calling out in confusion, but Zeke just watches, assuring himself that they'll meet again, once Nova reaches land safely. Just like that, Nova is swept away by the waves, disappearing into the storm, while Zeke lets out a heavy sigh of relief, hoping the little guy will make it out alive. Now left alone, Zeke reflects on himself, feeling like a pathetic old lizard who couldn't even protect one youngster till the end. Lost in his thoughts, he fails to notice the massive mosasaurus creeping up from behind. Despite his exhaustion and injuries, Zeke knows he has to give it everything he's got, no matter what. As he turns, his eyes widen as the enormous predator is already midair, launching straight at him. He barely has time to react before the creature crashes down with full force, dragging him deep into the water. As the water splashes rise, the mosasaurus emerges from the waves, searching for Zeke, but the big guy is already behind her. With a burst of strength, he bites down on her tail, but she thrashes violently, slipping free from his grip. That's when Zeke realizes this fight won't be easy. The longer it drags on, the harder it'll get. Right now, the water only reaches his calves, and the half-submerged trees limit the mosasaurus's movements. It gives Zeke a slight advantage for now, but once the water rises to his chest, everything will change. In deeper water, the creature will have the upper hand, able to strike and drag him under with ease. Zeke knows these mosasaurus aren't dumb. They're waiting for the flood to rise and the odds to shift in their favor. On top of that, he's already at a disadvantage, smaller in size and bleeding from his wound. There's no chance this beast will retreat, which leaves Zeke with only one option: fight till the very end. Looking at his wounded arm, Zeke questions if he even stands a chance. He remembers Nova's words, how he shouldn't despair over things he can't control, and should focus on not losing hope. Holding on to that thought, Zeke takes a deep breath and steadies himself. His eyes burn with determination as he prepares for the fight. To the mosasaurus's surprise, Zeke moves into an open area with no cover or obstacles. He does it deliberately, forcing the creature to charge straight at him. It's a risky move, a pure gamble, but at this point it's all he has left. As he braces himself, the mosasaurus lunges from the water, its massive jaws clamping down on Zeke's tail in one brutal strike. But before it can react, Zeke roars and counters, lunging forward and sinking his own jaws deep into the creature's flesh, refusing to back down no matter the pain. The creature lets out a piercing scream under Zeke's crushing bite, but he refuses to let go. With every ounce of strength left in him, Zeke presses harder, pinning the beast down until it finally goes still. Knowing he won, Zeke lets out a loud roar of victory. Before he can even catch his breath, a massive wave crashes over him, dragging his body into the current. When he opens his eyes again, everything has changed. He finds himself lying on a quiet beach under a bright sunny sky. The sea is calm, the waves gentle. For a moment he can't believe it, but then it hits him. He's made it. Overwhelmed, Zeke stares ahead at the vast stretch of land that goes as far as his eyes can see. Joy floods through him as he roars into the open air. After 57 days since meeting Nova, and 20 long years, he's finally back on the mainland. But as the excitement settles, a thought grips his heart. He remembers Nova, the little guy who fought beside him through it all. Looking around, Zeke calls out for him, scanning the shore with growing worry. Yet no matter where he looks, Nova is nowhere to be seen. Just like that, time passes. It's now been 100 days since Zeke crossed over to the mainland. and still there's no sign of the little fella. Despite that, the big guy has adapted to his new life pretty well, hunting for food and surviving on his own. But no matter how vast and full of life this new place is, Zeke's heart still lingers on that small, narrow island they once shared. On the first day he returned to the mainland 100 days ago, Zeke searched endlessly for Nova. He wandered the coastline until the sun went down, scanning every wave, every log, every shadow, but there was no sign of him. Still, he couldn't bring himself to give up. He knew that he survived the storm, then there was a chance, no matter how small, that the little guy was still out there somewhere. After coming this far, giving up wasn't in Zeke's nature. He stayed close to the shore for weeks, cutting down on food and sleep just to keep searching. But after 2 long months with no sign of Nova, he was finally forced to leave the coast behind. In time, his wounds healed, and with the steady supply of food, his strength returned. He even grew larger and more powerful than before. Yet deep inside, there remained a hollow ache that no hunt or victory could fill. That emptiness had a name, and it was Nova. Before he knows it, Zeke finds himself back on the shore, reliving the moments he once spent on that small island. There, he recalls the fishing method the little guy had taught him and decides to use it again. Even though Nova is gone, Zeke can still remember every word he said, clear as day, even after all this time. Despite being free, the days on the mainland feel unusually long, and Zeke can't help but wonder if it's because he's alone. The land is full of life, creatures of all kinds roam around, but none of it feels the same. The memories of Nova keep replaying in his mind, filling him with regret. He realizes he never told the little guy about his past, and starts to wonder if it was because he was ashamed of it. As he watches the waves roll in, he remembers the moment Nova once asked about his past, and how he brushed it off instead of opening up. Now he wishes he had told him everything back then when they still had time. He can still picture the disappointed look on Nova's face that day. But just as he's lost in those thoughts, to his absolute shock, Nova appears. The little guy actually finds him. At first, Zeke lets out a scream of pure excitement, shaking the life out of Nova in disbelief. But the moment quickly turns emotional, as he bursts out, frustrated and relieved, claiming he thought Nova had been dead all this time when he couldn't find him. However, Nova is surprised to see tears in the big guy's eyes for the first time. Zeke quickly tries to hide them out of embarrassment. And just like that, the two slip back into their usual bickering. Somehow, after everything, they found each other again. Proof that life's path is full of unexpected turns, and no one really knows what waits at the end of the road. As they both calm down, Nova reveals that he plans to continue his search for his father and asks Zeke about his own goal. The big guy admits he wants to accompany Nova until he finds him. But then Nova suddenly remembers the story Zeke once promised to tell about his past. The question catches Zeke off guard, but he quickly brushes it off and instead asks Nova what happened to him after they were separated. Nova clearly isn't thrilled by the dodge, but he lets it slide and keeps walking beside the old guy. Soon enough, the two are back to their usual rhythm, yapping, teasing, and continuing their journey together like nothing ever changed.